Sometimes you can just observe and you can see that way. For instance, there's trees that are getting really stressed in California, and then there's bark beetles and sudden oak death that are attacking the trees and moving in. Well, they're stressed first before the diseases hit and the insects hit. So that's an observational point where you can go in and you see they're dropping leaves and they're not growing as much, and some of them are really scraggly looking. But you can also test that.
You could also test for chemicals in the air and chemicals on the ground and in the water,
right.
To see what kind of pollution is there that you can't observe.
Right. Then you have to go into they're stressed, so why? And look into it. And indigenous people had all kinds of ways of finding those things out. They used observational powers, which we don't even understand how they did it. As a culture, we don't understand it. They had perceptions that they use. Aborigines can find water in the landscape without being able to see it or anything. Not necessarily from looking at where the plants are. They are using other senses, and we don't understand what they're doing as a culture. So then Tom Brown does a similar thing. He can chalk a mouse over rock. How do you do that? Yeah.
I was thinking about like soil testing and things such as that, and I was wondering, like, in terms of how indigenous people would never do a soil test, they wouldn't have the equipment, but if you can see that there are plants growing in it and there are fungi which you can see and invertebrates, then you can kind of assume that the bacteria are there and the things that you can't see. And so even if there's chemicals in the soil, does it matter at that point if all that other life is surviving with it?
On the soil test, what was the last thing you said?
If there are chemicals,
Yeah.
From pollution,
Right.
and those things are surviving, then does it matter? Like, do we really need to test further if we can see that the soil is alive?
We're going to get a lot more into that tomorrow, but the short answer is that if you have a really healthy soil, it will actually neutralize heavy metals and chemicals and that kind of stuff. So I still wouldn't, if there's some way you could remove them, that's better. But I'm not too worried. When I have a good, healthy soil, I'm not too worried about what's in the soil. Of course, if you have like heavy radiation or heavy lead, you've got to handle that. A lot of people in the inner city just do raised beds that are sealed on the bottom so that nothing can come through. Because they don't have to test.
So I would think right now, for me, there'd be two ways to look at things. One is the quantitative measure of things that everybody can verify. And then there's the qualitative measure of things that only you can verify. And maybe some other people will agree or disagree. But the quantitative is always there. For me, looking at permaculture, I don't know any of these right now. I'm just a baby. So I have to play with both. I don't know. So it's the same thing. You're asking about these things that are quantitative. Maybe that'll solve for you your questions. But then also bring up the qualitative part, the part that doesn't speak to quantity. You just know. Something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I would say on soil tests too, that I do soil tests if I can. It's always really interesting. You find out a lot about your ecosystem by doing that, but if you can't, then there's other things. There's plants that indicate if there's lead in the soil and different things as well. Now, the second part of accepting feedback is self-regulating. So once you get the feedback, then you've got to do something about it.
That's the hard part.
Yeah. And the thing that I found to be most helpful in that is to remove yourself, your personal feelings, your personal emotions from the situation. And sometimes it helps if you have a very formal feedback loop. For instance, when I get a feedback loop from students, I have to remove myself and listen to what they say. Maybe it's, you were really boring. So I have to deal with that, and rather than feel heard and all, I go, well, what do you mean by that? What was boring? You know, why did you react that way? I'm interested. What about my presentation lost your interest? And then I can tweak it. Then it becomes not me, it becomes my presentation, which I can always change. So that's really important, part of your feedback loop. If you go out in the garden and your plant dies, and you go, I'm never going to have anything. You know, I'm horrible.
No, it was the cutworms.
You gotta go, oh, that's so interesting. I wonder why that plant died. You know?
Oh, good
That's a feedback
compost.
loop. Wow, I got a feedback loop. Oh boy. It's just, yeah.
That reminds me that when you observe that the leaf is changing, if you have a log of the changes you have yourself input in the ground, then you can actually figure out what happened and why the leaf changed.
Yes.
So that's the feedback that's needed, is keeping a log of
Yes.
what you do. Like, I went 2 weeks on vacation and had nobody to water the plant. Oh, well, that could be a reason why it's wilted.
That's doing way better after doing that.
Or Joe took care of the garden for 2 weeks and now it's blooming before it was not. You know, what did he do that was different than what was usually done?
Yes, yes.
There's so
And
many
I-
things.
And I used to keep a journal in the garden, and one thing we did, because we had a lot of people in there, and it never went in completely because people wouldn't keep the entries. So,
Right.
so that was a feedback loop that I didn't handle, but I kept entries in the journal, and every time I did something in the garden, I wrote it down. It was just a journal. It was so useful. I'd go back and look and learn so much by doing that. And what I do now with my seedlings, every time I plant a seed, I write it in the book, what I planted when, what kind of soil I used, because I'm experimenting with soil mixes. And that speeds up the learning process so much if you just keep track of that stuff.
About soil testing, just a quick note. We at the community garden, the university in Gainesville will test to several different levels of specification and complexity for various fees. You scoop out soil with a clean spoon into a clean glass jar and mail it to the university. If you just Google for University Florida soil testing, you can find it. And you mail it to them and they send you back a very nice printout saying exactly what you need to do to amend your soil. In our case, we were supposed to add calcium, we were low in this and that and the other thing, and they gave an idea of what we needed to do to amend it. So that's a really basic first thing to start with. And they will do that, whether it's your home garden, it doesn't have to be, you know, it's any soil, it can be your window box, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
One thing I found out about that, which is important, is to have a sample of your soil. Like if you want to have the soil of your garden and you take close to the tomatoes, it could be very different than
Yes.
at the shade under that oak
Yes,
tree or
we
something.
sent-
like, so you want to have different samples.
Yeah,
so you
we
get
sent
the
3 or
picture.
4 different ones from different areas of the garden. Because where our garden is, it's 2 city lots, there was an old house that was raised. So what's under the house, or what was under the house, is higher in lime, it's more alkaline because of the cement, the concrete that leached into the soil, than the area that was under the old oak tree where it had all the years of leaves that broke down and is more acidic. So there are different, yes, exactly, different areas, different compositions.
I have to say too that because plants are capable of generating the pH they need, that the only pH tests that should matter to you in the vegetable garden should be the ones you get right from the rhizosphere, because the plant generates what it needs for pH. And so if you're not testing in the rhizosphere, you don't really know what you have.
Apparently you're not trying to grow blueberries.
Yeah, blueberries.
Yeah?
Yeah, I grow them in pine.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
They
I gotta
require
say
some
something
really-
about plants, it's very interesting. Getting a feedback loop from plants is a really interesting exercise because the plants respond to the people that are taking care of them. So and I have a kind of a communal garden where I'm training people, and I'll have some people come in and plants will die. Oh my gosh. It's because they're taking care of them. And someone else will come in and I'm just like,
Right.
So this is an observable phenomenon. it's not because that person's a bad person, they're not, they're a good person. But their energy, whatever, or their relationship with the plant, the plant's a living thing, it responds. And there's been many experiments done on this. There's some books out that
The Secret
go
Life
into
of
this
Plants.
last-
Yeah,
It's
that's a wonderful thing.
It's amazing.
Extra one. Box, right?
Yeah, Secrets of the Soils is another one by the same guys, and they researched this very heavily in the 40 years ago, and there's been more research since. So it's very well documented, and you can just observe it for yourself. Your own attitude makes a difference. And I try to be happy when I'm in the garden, not go out there when I'm mad at somebody, you know, because they pick, you know, it's
I
like
tell
your
them I
dog
love
or
them
your
all the
kid.
time.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
I'll
love and
hold
bless.
I'll hold them, like I'll hold the stem and I'll just
Admire it.
I love you.
tell them how appreciative I am and how grateful
Gratitude.
that they look so beautiful and they're going to help me, and I love living with them and they are green and happy. It's great.
I agree.
And I can tell when I don't spend enough time with them. You know, the next day, like if I just go and water, you know, the next time I go to them, they won't be as awake, you know, as vibrant or alive to me. You know, so then I'll spend a little extra time caring for them,
Nurturing.
and the next time I see them, they'll be happy.
That's cool. That's cool.
I think my
They do
plants are
have
more
some kind-
forgiving. Because I always doubt, every time I throw seeds, it's not gonna work this time. This year, my garden's gonna fail. And I go out there and they're up, and I'm like, oh my God, it's gonna fail. So they forgive my doubts every time.
That's right. I haven't seen them, that I haven't experienced of holding grudges, like people will stay mad at you for 10 years, you know, sometimes. That's
good.
different, just like a cat, you know.
And dogs.
I read an interesting article recently where the results in the plants from the person taking care of them is what's called the green thumb. Green
Right,
thumb is how are your plants reacting to you taking care of them.
right. And then the other part of that is just knowing what they eat and giving them what they eat. That's just that simple, you know, feed them, water them, then you have your green thumb. So people like that, if people, you know.
I have to just tell a quick story. I just have to tell a really quick story. When I was in college, I was very easily distracted, and I would forget to water my plants all the time. I just literally, weeks would go by, and I'd forget to water them, but I talked to them every night. And these things flourished. I go, people would come in and go, what's the last time you watered this plant? It's so dry, but it's got all these new leaves, and it's like, it looks really good. What's happening? I go, oh my gosh, I forgot to water it. And I'd water it, you know, and then it, you know, would be fine for a while, but it was amazing. It was amazing how they respond even more than to the chemical. They respond more to the personality and the beingness that you project to them. It was, to me, it was magical. I was like astounded. They just kept growing. They didn't die, even though I forgot to water them for weeks. You know, so I just had to throw it.
They liked your music.
They probably did, you know. We played more folk rather than a lot of heavy rock.
Sorry, who is the author of this book that you have mentioned, Secret of
Secret
Plants?
Life of Plants.
I don't remember.
Do you
Is
know?
it Bach? B-A-C-H?
I
Is
can't
it?
remember.
It's on my phone.
Yeah, I brought it with me. So
All
I'll
right.
bring it.
All right.
Oh, you know what? I think I have it written down somewhere.
You can find it in 6 seconds on Google.
Yeah, we'll find it on the internet. There's not, you can find it, just search it on the internet, you can find it right away. Okay, so the next principle views and value diversity. And diversity creates resilience. And this is true everywhere. It's, the monocrop is so vulnerable. People are panicked right now because of the corn situation. Because the GMOs aren't working, pesticides aren't working, you know. Yes, nature is gonna handle it. Sooner or later, nature will handle it.
Great.
You know, but, yeah, Yeah, if you have a bunch, I'll tell you one story. A friend of mine, Marcia Hanzi, works in Brazil doing polycropping, and she's a permaculture designer. She started, she got a grant to work on castor beans in a high poverty area in a dry lands. There's all these castor bean farms, and they were all using conventional agriculture, lots of inputs and lots of irrigation. So she went in there and chose very carefully plants that would assist the castor bean to survive. She started with Opuntia cactus, prickly pear, which helped pull up water and make it available actually to it holds water in the system, whatever comes in, it holds it there. And she planted some nitrogen fixing trees, some other things in the system that would help protect the castor bean and hold the water that did fall in the soil. And the result was she didn't use any inputs, she didn't use irrigation, and she had 3 to 8 times the yield of her neighbors that had all those inputs. And that was for the whole, everything that was harvested. The other thing that was a real advantage for her is that if the castor bean crop failed for some reason, they were growing sesame, what else? I'm going blank right now. they were growing 2 or 3 other crops that they could sell at market. And sesame grows very fast. The roots don't compete with the castor bean roots, so they weren't pulling the same nutrients. They could grow close together. So they could grow sometimes 2 sesame crops, and then they could eat the opuntia, sesame, and all these different things. So it's much more resilient as a system. And shade-grown coffee growers, same thing. The coffee prices are a commodity price. They go up and down. It has nothing to do with what the farmer's doing at all. It's a world market manipulation of people trying to make money, gambling on commodity prices. And the farmer can be ruined by that because he's got a good crop. He can't sell it because it's selling for less than what it took for him to grow it because of this gambling going on. Or he's got a poor crop and then it's a great price and he loses. So a lot of coffee growers just won't grow coffee, and then they go hungry. So the shade-grown coffee coffee naturally grows in the shade. They've bred it so that it will grow in the sun so they can monocrop. It's just the ridiculous measures people go to do things the old ways. So the shade-grown has to be grown by a small farmer. It's more labor-intensive because you need more attention on it. But they also grow bananas, mangoes, nuts, a bunch of other stuff that protects the coffee and feeds them. So they don't. If the coffee prices go weird, they're just like, okay, whatever. I'll just sell it locally, or I'll roast them and keep them around myself, or whatever. If I have enough to eat, feed my family, or I can sell some of the bananas this year.
We can grow that here, coffee, do we need altitude?
Yeah, there's some people growing coffee in South Florida. I grew it in California, and but it was small. I never grew it big, so it produced. Did you visit that guy with us? There's a nursery where he was growing coffee in a pot, feeding with fish emulsion, getting 5 to 15 pounds of beans off of the plant.
Off of one potted plant?
Coffee plant.
Wow.
So he took it inside to keep it warm in the winter, because that's, it's here you have to be worried about that. It's pretty sensitive. I don't think it likes below 40 degrees.
Who was that and what plant was it?
Yeah, it's beautiful, but she loves fish emulsion. Okay, so that's diversity, and the important thing to remember about diversity is it's not the amount of diversity, because you can have tons of different plants, it's the amount of beneficial connections. So the reason Marcia Hanzi was successful was because she chose her plants very carefully to support each other. Plants that didn't interfere with each other's nutrition gathering, but actually helped each other, helped feed each other, or helped protect each other in some way. And that's called a plant guild in permaculture. Some people call it a community, plant community. But Quiet community is something in ecology is something you find in the wilderness where plants grow together. They may or may not have a super beneficial connection. They at least aren't interfering with each other. But a guild is where plants are actually actively helping each other. This is an example of beneficial. There's nothing that has more beneficial connections going on than a tree. It's just amazing. We'll go over that a little bit later, but the specifics. But it's amazing. Okay, we're going to move a little quickly because I want to get into the patterns. But this principle is something that some people have a hard time with. It's something that you have to observe for yourself. So use edge. Edge is where the energy is. I'll give you a quick example. The edge between a forest and a meadow has the plants that you find in the forest. It has the plants that you find in the meadow, which are completely different. Sometimes there's nothing that's the same. And it has plants that only grow on the edge of a forest and a meadow. It's the only place you find those plants. So it has 3 times the amount of diversity as you would have in just the meadow or just the forest, right? And there's a lot of animals that live on the edge or live on the plants on the edge. There's just tremendous amount of interaction going on there. So you get a lot of yield on the edge, potentially. So we try to put edge into the design from the viewpoint of creating that yield. So you can think of edge as the edge between a building and land, or water and land. And when you increase the edge, you can get more yield. I'll show you that. Here's an example of nature creating more yield along the edge. So it's easier for the weeds to get a foothold here. And then the fence.
The fence would act as a windbreak that would stop blown dust and so on, and it would cause an accumulation of soil at the edge. Plus, you've probably got asphalt behind that that's beginning to crumble at the edges to provide some structure for all that. And then seeds are also, blown seeds would be stopped to some extent by.
And you also have an edge
Stop foot traffic
between
too.
the sidewalk and the parking lot, right?
And
Where it doesn't quite match up, so it's easier to break through.
and you do and dribble down the fence in the morning.
Yes, a fog net.
And off the
And sometimes birds, maybe not here because there's barbed wire up there. Sometimes birds land on the fence and poop. Yeah. You see the weeds going really healthy around a fence because the birds are landing on it.
But the dew on the fence, that's a really interesting point. You know that in really dry areas like in the Atacama Desert on the margins of Peru, the only way they get water is to put up a fog net that condenses the dew that comes over in the morning and trickles down, and they collect that. And it's the only water source those people get.
That's what trees do.
They have a billboard in Peru that does that now. They created she mentioned Peru, and there's a billboard in Lima that does basically exactly that. It just condenses water, and it's water for the people.
And this parking lot might slope a bit. Usually they do to let the water run off, so maybe there's a lot of water going in there too.
Can you define succession? Can you define succession?
Did I put succession in here?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's the power of succession.
Yes. Darn. I was going to find that on the 3rd day, 4th day.
You're just going to have to wait.
I better get it out of there. Thank you. Succession is
Feedback.
how nature, this is actually succession. Nature, when you have a barren, degraded environment, will start reclaiming that with weeds. And these weeds are very tough. They can break through concrete. They need very little nutrition. They can pull it from the air or get it out of rock a lot of times. And these weeds are actually great to have in your system because they're so nutritious. When they die, they create soil that other plants can grow in. And then you get the next succession stage up. So you might have little bushes and other plants that couldn't survive in a parking lot because now they have a little bit of actual ecosystem soil and some protection from the sun for the seedlings to come up, some wind protection. So the weeds needs to provide just enough ecosystem for the next stage, and then those provide enough protection for the trees to come in. And if you see a parking lot like this over 50 years, it'll be a forest.
After fires, after volcanic eruptions, Krakatoa, the big eruption in the island, which was a perfect laboratory for succession. The scientists were all there with their cameras waiting to see what was the first seedling that was going to sprout and how it went from there and rebuild into a natural system.
And Chernobyl.
So we use succession in permaculture. We speed up the process, and we'll be going into that in a lot of detail on the food forest day.
I think there's some natural examples that people could probably observe. I know that like in the mountains where I'm from, you can look at like gravel washes where they've cut for roads, and it's like a pure granite, kind of decomposed granite. It's all minerals, and so the only things that grow in there are certain, like specific wildflowers, certain penstemons and other stuff. And there's just a couple threads of fungus going through there, and that's about it. But there's a whole set of plants that can live in that, and they leave behind kind of their organic skeleton, and they keep building up this organic matter, and then over time grasses will move in. And then grasses are really rapidly produce these kind of skeletons because they seem to have like an annual die-off or something at the roots. And then after that, you start seeing other stuff move in. You can actually watch the progression, or seeing areas that have been exposed longer versus fresh areas.
Well, so this is another example of an edge where there's lots of life. The edge between water and wilderness. This is a natural edge, and you'll see turtles and fish being near, underneath the falling logs because they protect them from predators. A lot of life next to the edge as compared to the middle of the stream or the middle of the forest. There's 3 times as much or more. So use edge in design. And we'll go over more techniques of that as we go through the class. But for now, I wanted you to just go out, run outside, and find some edge. Find as much edge as you can in 5 minutes.